Welcome to School Report, a glimpse into the classrooms of St. Lucie County Public Schools. School Report provides the opportunity to share with the community academic and extracurricular activities of students in our schools. And now, here is School Report.
I want to welcome everybody today. One of the Holocaust members, the president of the Child Survivors Hidden Children of the Holocaust, cannot be with us today. He's ill and he was unable to join us, but he wrote us a little letter and I am going to read it to you. And it says, "Dear students and teachers, I am sorry that I am not able to be with you this year. Nothing could have kept me away, but my doctor told me to take it easy. So I hope you will forgive me that I am not with you today. I send you my greetings and congratulate you on your accomplishments and studies. Oak Hammock School has been teaching you much about the Holocaust, but the most important lesson that you have to take away from this is that you are the future leaders and protectors of all people. You are the generation that will make sure that this country and the world will be a safer place for all. Again, congratulations and thank you for your warm welcome to my group, the Child Survivors Hidden Children of the Holocaust. This gathering is a most unusual event which will remain in everyone's memories. Bless you and thank you for what you do now and in the future. Your friend, Norman." I know that all my students know who Norman is because we've been reading his memoirs and working on a documentary that hopefully we'll get to see towards the end of the assembly. We're having technical difficulties right now. But we are blessed to have 21 Holocaust survivors on stage. We are blessed to have you. Thank you so much for taking your time, taking this trip all the way from Boca to come and speak to our students. These are all sixth grade students. You've been in all their classes. So you've seen one or two, but now you get to see them all on stage. And right now I want to present the vice president of this organization and our main speaker, John Koenigsberg. And I'm sorry if I pronounce your name. Coming up. Thank you.
Thank you very much. What a very, very impressive group and a very impressive amount of work you guys have done. My name, I was introduced as John Koenigsberg. That's actually not my name. My name Koenigsberg is correct, but John, my name was changed during the Holocaust. My real name is Joseph. My real name is still Joseph, but I go by John, I kept the name. I always thought my name was changed once, but just in the last few years, I found out my name had actually changed twice. When we get to that portion of my story, you'll well understand. I was born in Amsterdam, Holland in 1937, and I'm very fortunate. I'm a child survivor of the Holocaust, one of the very, very lucky ones. Only 7% of children under the age of 16 survived the Holocaust. I did not start speaking about the Holocaust. My parents luckily survived. They never spoke about it. Obviously, I never spoke about it either until I gave my testimony to Steven Spielberg's Shoah Project in 1995. Not speaking about the Holocaust is nothing unusual. There are still many, many survivors who do not speak. One of my fellow Dutch child survivors, Dr. Robert Krell, a noted child psychiatrist living in Canada, said it best, and I quote with his permission, "We mastered silence. First and foremost, we harnessed the skills of silence that were so necessary for our survival. Normally playful, loud, boisterous, demanding, crying, laughing, we were the children who at age of 2 or 5 or 9 learned to be quiet, courteous, cooperative, and respectful. Few of us cried during hiding, and few of us cried after. There was a fear that I have heard expressed many times that if I began to cry, I might never stop. Those who were able to cry felt a little better, but even they seldom, if ever, cried in public. After all, children might be asked by well-meaning adults why they are crying, and what could we say in response? So we kept quiet. None of us wanted to be pitied. We only wanted to be accepted. A little bit about Holland. I have a little short speech, and my speech is normally quite a bit longer. The very, very small country of Holland, right at the beginning of the war, had 110,000 plus Jews living in the tiny country. We have the very, very sad distinction to have lost more Jews than any other Western European country. The tiny country of Holland lost 80% of the Jewish population. The country, obviously, that lost more is an Eastern European country, Poland, at 90%. Holland was well aware what was going on all around us. Kristallnacht, November 1938, the invasion and occupation of Poland, Czechoslovakia, and directly to our north, Norway and Denmark. But we felt fairly confident that nothing would happen to Holland. We had signed papers during the First World War to stay neutral. Again, we signed papers, the Second World War, documented to stay neutral. But what we didn't realize is that Holland was necessary for Germany, because Germany was directly to our west and directly to our east, directly to our west was England, who was at war with Germany. They wanted a foothold in the tiny country of Holland to put their anti-aircraft machines in so they can start shooting down the airplanes that were coming across. So without any notification whatsoever, the 10th of May, 1940, the Germans came over. Only took 5 days. They almost totally leveled our second largest city of Rotterdam, and were told if we did not surrender, the same thing would happen to the rest of Holland. Only took 5 days, and we were totally occupied. May of 1940. Didn't take long for the Germans to tell the Jewish people what was expected of them, and we had all kinds of sanctions. These are very, very few of those. We had to register with the Jewish Council. They wanted to know exactly how many Jewish people lived in Holland. We were only allowed to go and use Jewish businesses. Amsterdam, the middle of Amsterdam became a ghetto. We were fairly fortunately, we lived in Amsterdam, a little on the outskirts, and did not have to go to the middle of Amsterdam. We were not allowed to use any public swimming pools, beach. The children were only allowed to go to Jewish schools. We were not allowed to go to any public markets, zoos, restaurants, hotels, museums, and everywhere we went, the signs were Jews were not allowed. The final sanctions came in 1942. This was what they considered to be the final solution to the Jewish problem. The very first sanction, 1942, was the deportation phase. The deportation phase came in 3 different sections. The Germans were very, very, very meticulous in anything they did. The very first sanction was, the summons were, the 18 to 35 people who were not working, they were summoned to supposedly help with the war effort to work in one of the ammunition factories in Germany. Obviously, it did not take long for word to come back to Holland to tell us exactly what was going on with those people that wound up in Germany. Most of them went to concentration camps. Then that same first sanction, the first part of that. Age group went up a little bit, and then the second sanction was the elderly, and the third sanction was the sick. My parents worked, both my parents worked at the only hospital that Jews were allowed to go to, which was the Jewish hospital in Amsterdam. July of 1942 is when Margot Frank, Anne Frank's sister, received her summons. By that time, obviously, they knew what was going on, so that's when the Frank people went into hiding. More sanctions. During 1942, we had to get identification cards from the Germans. You've seen those, I'm sure, in history books. It had the person's picture and a J stamped both on the left side and on the right side. My parents had another word stamped on their identification card, the word gesperrt, which is a German word literally translated as immunity. They were immune to having to go to the camps or to be transported the first two sanctions until it became the sick phase. And of course, everyone knows the yellow star. We all had to wear a yellow star. This was mine. After we split up, and you'll get there, you'll find out, my dad took this and put it in his wallet, and I received it after the war. The one very, very steady person in my life was my grandfather. Every time I speak, I have his picture with me. My grandfather came to live with us in 1938 after my grandmother passed away. And he and I were very, very close. He didn't work. Obviously, I was young. I didn't work. But I so remember the very first part of 1943, sorry. Knock on the door. The Gestapo was at our door and took my grandfather away. Traumatized me for many, many, many years. And I've done a lot of research, made a lot of friends back in Holland, and I finally have, I guess, a little closure. I now have his papers. The Germans were very exact in whatever they did. I have his papers with the exact date that he was picked up, taken to Westerbork, which was a concentration and primarily a transportation camp, and with exact paperwork, including his health papers. He wound up in Sobibor. I also have paperwork, a little bit about myself and about my other family as well. Most of them wound up in Sobibor. Shortly after my grandfather was picked up, my dad and I went on the street. We were only allowed, again, one of those sanctions, we were only allowed to walk, we need some groceries, etc., between 3 and 5 in the afternoon. My dad and I were walking to go to the store, and obviously this was the elderly phase. They just picked my grandfather up, and if they had any space left in the cattle cars, they picked up anybody who had a yellow star. My dad and I were picked up. We were taken to a very, very large theater called the Hollandse Schouwburg in the middle of Amsterdam. They had taken out all the seats, made it one huge room. The people, when parents came with children, the children were separated from their parents and being taken care of by some nurses in an annex to the theater called the creche. My dad was able to show his identification card, and he was allowed to leave. Before he left, he told one of the nurses who he knew what to do with me. I don't know the exact timeline. It had to be very, very shortly after my dad left. I became violently ill. She must have given me something. The nurse took me to one of the Nazis in charge, told them that she had a very sick child who needed to be hospitalized. Taken to the hospital, put on a gurney, the same hospital both my parents worked, put on a gurney, ready to be operated on, and I so vividly remember things were done a little bit differently than they are now. In order to anesthetize someone, they put a contraption on somebody's face that was lined with gauze. Ether or chloroform was put on until the patient was asleep, and then on to the operating room. And I wasn't having it. I was squirming, I wouldn't have this thing on my face, and the children probably will get a kick out of this. The nurses were playing peekaboo with me. Put it on my face, take it off, put it on my face, until I finally let them, and I was finally ready to be hospitalized and be going to the operating room. They cut me as if I had an appendicitis attack, did not take my appendix out, but sutured me right back up. As an aside, in 1980, I had a gallbladder attack. And during that time, when the surgeon opened you up and saw the appendix as well, they took both units, both organs. The surgeon came to my hospital room the night before, saw my scar. I obviously told him what happened, and now I'm luckily without both. Probably the longest time between a surgeon that cut you to take an organ out and the organ actually came out. 1943 to 1980. My parents at that time said, it's time. It was only a matter of months, which we found out later, only a matter of months before the hospital was evacuated. So they had made some arrangements. They went to their house, they took their mezuzahs off of both doors. I still have those. Normally I talk with PowerPoint, so these are much larger. These are the original mezuzahs that were on our doorposts. They put some stuff in a briefcase, suitcase, had made some arrangements for people to take care of me for money in Amsterdam, the northern part of Amsterdam. My dad had made some arrangements, and he worked with the underground, the resistance, in the northeastern portion of Holland. My dad helped try to find homes for Jews, hiding places for Jews. My mom lived with a family, a young couple, for 2.5 years. The neighbors never knew she was there. She did a lot of cross-stitching. I've got a lot of examples of those. I have a stack back home about this big. Did a lot of reading. She was a very well-learned lady, and delivered both of this woman's babies in the 2.5 years that she was there. Unbeknownst to my parents, the people that they had left me with actually belonged to the NSB, National Socialistic Party. It was Dutch people favoring Germans. The only reason they did not turn me over is because of the monies my parents had given them and more monies to come. The resistance found out very, very shortly after I went there and took me from Amsterdam, which is north, a little bit north of Holland, to the most southern province of Holland called Limburg. And that's when my first name change came. I've still been researching, and 3 years ago I received some documents that showed that my name changed just for that short trek. It's about 150 kilometers, a little over 100 miles, from Amsterdam to the southern portion of Holland. What do you think would have happened had we been stopped and they had to show identification with the name Joseph Königsberg, a little black-haired, brown-eyed boy? Everyone would have been gone. So my name changed to Johnny, or John, Johnny van Zyl, which is a very, very Dutch-sounding name. I was taken to a home by the name of Snijkers, and my name changed again. It wound up to be Johnny Snijkers, and for the neighbor's sake, I was supposed to be a sickly cousin from Rotterdam who came to recuperate. I obviously still had my stitches in. If the Germans came to look for me, Rotterdam was almost totally obliterated, so they couldn't find any paperwork. Also, about 3 years ago, from that same person, I wound up with a Vimeo. Those of you who don't know what a Vimeo is, it's a more professional YouTube. It's an hour and 15-minute documentary of what happened to the hospital from 1940 to 1945 during the war. I was always wondered, why did I have to go through this? Why couldn't I have just been taken to the hospital? My parents were obviously well known and hidden within the hospital. But the Vimeo showed me, there were 6 people that are narrating this, I've recently translated it, what people tried to make themselves very sick. Very, very gory things that they did to themselves to wind up in the hospital. The Germans were walking the halls of the hospital trying to find people that were faking it. So that's why I needed to be operated on. So I stayed with the Snakers family a little over 3 years. The house itself had 3 bedrooms, 1 for Mama and Papa Snakers, 1 for 3 daughters, and I shared my foster brother Jan's bedroom for the almost 3 years I was there. Very little food. The kids probably will get a kick out of this if I can try to figure out how to do this. If we figured out very little food, we could get some bread. That was about it. If you think that just figure out that this is a slice of bread and my fingers represent a little piece of cheese, bologna, etc., we ate what was called schuifkaas, which is a very Dutch-sounding word. It doesn't exist, but we called it schuifkaas. So if we had a little piece of cheese, we took a big bite of bread, little bite of cheese, and kept on moving it. Schuifkaas literally translates into, schuif means moving, and kaas is cheese, movable cheese. So, no cold water only, no hot water, no heat. We were bathed once a week, like the old Westerns, one big container in the middle of the kitchen floor. Mama Snakers had put some water, kettle of water on the potbelly stove until the water was heated, and one after the other one, we were bathed. Not allowed to go to school. The next school was only 5-6 miles away in a larger city. This was a little tiny village where I was being hidden. About 600 people. The German installation to start shooting down the British airlines was less than a football field away. A number of times during the war, they came in the house. I hid, being asleep twice. The third time I wasn't so lucky. I went out the back and stayed back there until they finally left. Did not go to school, as I said. People were very Catholic. Went to school, Catholic school, went to church every Sunday. The only thing I couldn't do and could not do was communion, participate in, because I hadn't been baptized. So a very clear indication that at least the Catholic community knew I didn't belong. And as far as the neighbors are concerned, here I am, a black-haired, brown-eyed little boy, among all the blue-eyed, light-color hair people. I've written to my foster sister, who passed away, the last one passed away 3 years ago, many, many times. Why wasn't I found out? And the only thing that we could figure out is that they were more perturbed with the Germans invading us, people had lived there for generations, than to just give a little Jewish boy away. So I was very, 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 very fortunate. D-Day, June of 1944. There obviously, finally, the Allies came into France, liberated France, Luxembourg, Belgium, and a little tiny portion of Holland where I was hidden. Their object was actually to go north and do the rest, but they were turned back twice by an operation for you history buffs, Operation Market Garden. It was history's greatest airborne operation at that time. They were defeated twice and decided to go into Germany to liberate Germany and to try to get to Berlin before the Russians got there. That was September of 1944 when we were liberated. I remember it well. We came out of our bomb shelters. We were waving the red, white, and blue flag of Holland and the orange flag of the monarchy, only to get shot at one more time. There were still some Germans in the hills. It took a couple of hours, and we were finally free. And we were liberated by the GIs. We followed those Americans around. My pockets never bulged so much with candies that I hadn't had for the 3 years than I've ever had. Anyway, that winter, the winter of 1944-45, was the harshest winter that Holland's ever had. Wound up to be called the Hunger Winter. It still is called the Hunger Winter. 18,000 Dutch citizens died of famine. We wound up eating tulip bulbs and sugar beets. That was the winter 1944-45. And then finally, May of 1945, the Brits and the Canadians liberated the rest of Holland, and we were finally free. May. I always thought my dad came to pick me up in July of 1945. First of all, what I missed before, when my parents had made arrangements, they decided all three of us would go into hiding separately. Can you imagine giving an only child away? It wasn't until I became a parent what I realized what they had actually done. Anyway, my parents had no idea if I was still alive, and just recently I found out, again, through some resistance papers, my dad came to pick me up the 19th of August, 1945. Went back to Amsterdam, met my mom, and we became a happy family again. A lot more stories about the Snijkers family. I don't have the time, obviously, but a number of years ago, I was very fortunate to be able to give them the Righteous Among the Nations Award, which is an award extremely hard to get. It's the highest award given by the State of Israel to non-Jews who acted to the noblest principles of humanity by risking their lives to help Jews during the Holocaust. And if it was not for the Snijkers family, number one, I probably wouldn't have been here. And if I would be here, if my parents had not returned, you would have been listening to the Catholic man telling you what happened. The reason I speak about my experiences and the reason we have these programs and the teachers who are excellent is because I believe that the lessons of the Holocaust must not be diminished into just a footnote in history. We must educate the younger generations and imbue them with the spirit of remembrance, as well as the mission to combat all forms of racial, religious, and ethnic hatred before it is too late. We must continue to confront and remind all those who really did not know, those who did not want to know, and those who don't want to be disturbed by such tragic memories, as well as those shamefully attempt to minimize the extent of the tragedy or deny it altogether. I speak in memory of my beloved grandparents, aunts, and uncles, and cousins who were among the 6 million who were murdered, and I speak so that my voice will be heard by the generations who come after me, and I speak so that we and all generations to come will never forget. Thank you.
Thank you so much, John. I'm going to let Zelda come up to the mic, and she's going to present all our other survivors.
So moving right along, you just heard John Koenigsberg. This is just one tiny history of the Holocaust, of a child who didn't know what he needs to do to survive or why he is doing what he's doing. But anyways, this is just one facet of the Holocaust. You are meeting child survivors who share their lives to bring a message of acceptance and safety for all, and the loving spouses out there who embrace their partners with tenderness and support. I want to introduce you to our survivors that came on the bus with us. So we'll do it in alphabetical order. I won't give them the microphone because it might take a little bit too long and we have to meet the bus on time. First of all, meet Anya Baum. Anya? Okay, stand up, Anya. Now here is a little girl from Belarus on the run. Her father was murdered. She survived with her mother and brother, running away from the front of the war. And would you believe, if any of you studied about Stalingrad, she survived the bombardment of Stalingrad, the great battle that turned the war against the Germans. And Anya not only is our wonderful member, but she goes on the March of the Living, this time, what, the second or third time? Second time. Thank you, Anya. She is our child survivor. Now, meet Helena Baumgarten. Helena? Now, Helena is from Poland, Warsaw, escaped during the formation of the ghetto to the Soviet-occupied Poland, was incarcerated and survived in the distant, distant, bitter cold of Siberia. And this is Helena Baumgarten. Thank you, Helena. By the way, so far, these survivors, not only are they the symbol of the Holocaust, but they also speak about it, and they teach children, youngsters, and older than you to share the history of the Holocaust. Now, meet our ex-president, or a special name, officio, whatever you want to call it, Pierre Schanover, Dr. Pierre Schanover. A little boy out of France, all alone, was incarcerated in the French ghetto and concentration camps. And would you believe this little kid, at the age of 10 or something like that, escaped under a garbage truck, hiding underneath the garbage truck. And eventually he was helped by good people, and he survived. Thank you, Pierre. Meet our wonderful member, Helen Daniel. Helen is from Germany. This little child of 10 experienced the Kristallnacht. You've heard about that. Saw their synagogue burned and no one helped. That's another picture of the Holocaust. Thank you, Helen. Where is Marvin Fiddler? This little guy, a child, a little boy, 10, saw evil beyond imagination. The ghettos burned, his sisters were killed, hiding in holes, helped by good people, and tortured by not so good people, escaped the killers hiding in holes and in the forests. Marvin, thank you. Since I'm going in alphabetical order, I'll call myself Zelda Fuchsman. I was born in Poland. It is Ukraine now. It was occupied first by the Soviets, and we escaped the approach of the Germans and wound up in distant, bitter cold of Siberia. Returned, all our family were murdered in the ditches. Henny Galel, a little girl out of Poland, a little child, under the Nazis at first, under the Soviets, and eventually found somewhat of a horrible existence and suffering in Russia, but she survived. Here's Henny. Lily Glass. Now you notice all the countries that I'm mentioning. Here she is from Belgium, Lily Glass, the sweetest, nicest lady. I really like her. She was a little girl, survived in hiding and saved in all the places. You know where she was in hiding? In a convent, pretending not to be Jewish. How would you like to be 10, 11 years old and pretend in order to survive? That was a picture of the Holocaust. Thank you, Lily. Anita Koch, out of Germany. She survived 3 camps in China. Do you know that there were camps where Jews were being held? Kinshau, Pinglian, Seward, and in the Shanghai ghetto. And you know who took care of the Shanghai ghetto, overlooked it? The Japanese, who were at war with America and Russia at that time. But regardless, 25,000 Jews survived in Shanghai ghetto. Thank you so much. Now, you just heard John Koenigsberg, but this is my brief take on him. From Holland, a little toddler given up by his parents to save his life. Can you imagine as a parent to give up your child? He was hidden by a dear Holland Christian family who he calls his foster family. John had them acknowledged as righteous among nations by Yad Vashem, Jerusalem. Thank you, John. By the way, 12 of our members from our group acknowledged their saviors as righteous among nations. They saved them. I will not tell them who they are, but it's part of our book and so on. Peter Colby, where are you, Peter? No. Here is another country of distinction that welcomed the Jews. Out of Vienna, Austria, a toddler whose memories of Kristallnacht, stones flying through their windows, still bring on nightmares. Thank you. Every time I see Basha McDonald, and I remember the picture from the book Lost Childhood, her daddy kissing her on her lips. Basha, she was in Poland, suffered in the ghetto, then hidden with a Christian family and with the partisans who were fighting the Germans. Thank you, Basha. And I kiss you on your lips. I love that picture. Tova Rabunsky. There she is. Tova, a little toddler hidden by good people. Tova is the kindest and giving person, and she is really part of our heart in our organization. Tova, we appreciate you and thank you. Zhenya Roth. Zhenya? Okay. Out of Poland, She's a baby survivor. She was born during the war and hidden by a Polish family. If her parents hadn't survived, she wouldn't be here with us. She would be somewhere among the Polish people in Poland. But her parents survived, and they were reunited after the war. Thank you, Zhenya. Ryża Rosenblum, out of Poland, hardly 10 years old, spent 5 years in the Lodz ghetto as a slave laborer. Can you imagine a child working? That was lucky because most were sent away to the killing camps. All her family were murdered. Millie Selinger, out of Poland, in the Lodz ghetto, and hidden by good people. And here she is, survived. Thank you, Millie. Here is a special lady, Erica Spindell. Actually, she wrote a book about her survival from the time that she was a toddler and coming to America. She's out of Austria. This little girl, a toddler, maybe 3, 4 years old, their apartment faced the main street of Vienna, and she saw the parade with Hitler coming into town, celebrating the reunification of Germany and Austria, the Anschluss. They were able to get away because in those years, Shanghai was an open city. But eventually her parents wound up under the hold of the Japanese, and she lost her father in Shanghai. But here is Erica. Thank you, Erica. Now I'm coming to the last letter. Frenzatz, out of Poland, Warsaw, a little girl who saw out of her window the gathering of Jews in the Umschlagplatz, where they were packed into cattle cars and taken to the killing camps. Fran, at the age of 10, hid her toddler sister herself to escape the marauding German killers. They too were saved by good Polish people. To just underscore what you're seeing here is that there were good people that saved Jews in every country of Europe. After the war, they were asked, why did you do that? You could have been killed, your family destroyed, your houses burned. And you know what they answered? A very simple answer, and you know that answer, each one of you. Because it was the right thing to do. This is who we are as human beings, with the right thing to do. So for today, let's pledge to do the right thing. But before I finish, I want to also acknowledge we had a busload of people and others coming in from different directions. And I want you to meet in the audience, Councilwoman Morgan, I believe, is here, and somebody from the Board of Education. Stand up so people can see you. So you see, we matter because these leaders are here to watch over us. Thank you. Also, meet the leaders of Insight. Insight through education. It's an organization that actually has funded our bus for 6 years to come here. And people from Insight, please stand up so we can all thank you. Back there. Thank you. Also, I want you to meet our special guests, Randy Posner, who is the president of Next Generation, and board members Barbara Beyer and Jennifer Blumenthal. Next Generation. You know what that means? is they are the voices after we are not here to talk to you, the next generation. That's who they are. I also want you to meet some very special people that decided that it's worthwhile to spend a day away from their own students, like Shelley Katz from Donna Klein Jewish Academy, Carolina Simon from Loggers Run Middle School, Susan Pietro, Equestrian Trail Elementary School. We also have Ellen Allman, a social worker who helps us in many ways, and Hinda Rosenbaum. Where are you, Hindale? Oh, all the way back there. Now, Hinda is a very special lady. Her husband is Jack Rosenbaum, and he takes high school students on the March of the Living to Poland and Israel. And she has another project, it's called March with Miriam. She pairs up students with Holocaust survivors, and we become friends. We're not anymore old people. We have girlfriends and boyfriends that like us because we are their equal. So that's what Hinda does. And now I want you to meet children of survivors. They speak for us and bring the message of justice for all, now and for the future. And please stand up. Zahava Lieblich, Karen Moskowitz, Sonia Nudrich, Carolina Simon, the teacher, Hetty Tellerman. You have to know that this day has been a gift to our child survivors, hidden children. You have given us a gift, the great warm welcome, that luscious lunch, and the love extended to us by your students, the ambassadors, your staff, teachers, BELKIS, MADERA, and Angel, and your principal. You know what this feels like? Like a wonderful healing compress. That's what you do. You make us feel whole and healing. We can go home with a feeling that the future is in good hands and loving hearts. So we thank you and thank you.
We're a little bit saddened that we're having technical difficulties for the documentary. But we're still working on it. But I'm going to put some people on the spot. I am going to call Aiden and Michael up here. Come on up. I know that the survivors and the guests have seen this documentary already. We showed the documentary in the hammock, and it worked perfectly. We're having technical difficulties showing it here. But I want to tell you real quick that my students, my critical thinking students, wherever you are, I need you to stand up right now, please. First and second period, critical thinking. We have some more over there. These students have worked on this documentary for a month and a half because they read Norman Froshman's story from 3 different sources. They read it from a 12-chapter memoir that he wrote himself. Then they read it from a book that was given to us from this beautiful organization called We Remember the Children, and also from a scholastic book where his story is displayed. So after reading all that, they had to work in groups, and they wrote scripts. They broke it down. After that, they were looking for images everywhere, so we downloaded images, we downloaded videos, and everything was set. These 2 gentlemen started working on their own portion of, we were going to have 2 different documentaries. And they worked on it, and they worked on it. And one day they came and they said, Ms. Madera, everything is gone. Everything was gone. And, my students know that, that's the reality. So I had to download all that stuff again onto my own computer. Now, I had my children, my students, my critical thinking students, they were sending me pictures. I had them pull out their phones. I usually don't have them pull out their phones, but for this particular activity they did. And they send me pictures and they send me videos. So all the pictures and all the videos in the documentary was sent, by my whole entire class. These are the editors. They spent days editing this documentary. And they're so proud of it. We are so proud of it. And we really wanted to show you guys this beautiful documentary.
In the late 1930s, Poland was a beaming city in the center of Europe. With vibrant architecture and welcoming citizens, it was a very nice place to live. Business dealings were a frequency, and it gave Poland a large amount of resources to work with. The average person owned a company or 2. Poland was very big, and the capital was absolutely delightful. Children played many types of games, workers worked, and people for the most part minded their own business. Citizens were not discriminatory and showed hospitality to anybody, no matter what religion you were, what gender you were, or what your heritage was. Religion flourished, especially Judaism. The people regularly went to synagogues, which were scattered all over the place, and spent the day there on Jewish holidays. There was already some acts of anti-Semitism before any armed hostilities, though. This is where Norman Frashman, a Holocaust survivor, was born and raised for the first 10 years of his life.
We come from a well-to-do family within Warsaw. Never denied anything. And what I mean by we, there were basically 4 of us. My mother, dad, I had a sister who was 18 months younger than I. Plus, as I mentioned, was surrounded by a tremendously big family. My maternal grandmother had 11 children, paternal had 7. And they were all, most of them were married with children, so there was an overabundance of cousins and very closely knit family, aunts, uncles, very functional. And suddenly the rug was pulled from under us. And this happened on September 1 of 1939.
Poland, September 1939. The German foe begins its ruthless march of conquest and sets the stage for World War II. Poland's 34 million inhabitants, crushed, scattered, and enslaved. Tens of thousands of square miles of territory shrink before the movement of lightning-armored columns. Poland and the world. On September 1st, Danzig is incorporated into the Reich, and all Europe is aflame. World War II is a reality. Nazi regulars move up. The Nazi air arm plays a major role in the wanton destruction of Polish territory. The method is now a familiar one. First reconnaissance planes go aloft to secure valuable photographic data. The aerial pictures will show the movement and position of Polish troops, and also the undefended sectors that will supply easy targets for Nazi bombs.
Upon the urging of the Polish government, who advised us to evacuate the city and go eastward towards the Soviet Union. So we were in the transportation business, and my dad took a horse and wagon. couldn't go into a car, there was no gasoline available. And we ventured out into destination unknown, becoming instant refugees. And it's noteworthy that we had to travel strictly in the day, at night, because anything that moved in the daytime was shot at by the German Air Force. So in the daytime, we would hide in forests, walk over to peasants for a handout of a slice of bread, glass of milk. And eventually, we stopped very close to the Soviet border.
On the Soviet border, the Frozman family was stopped in the attempt to smuggle themselves over the border. They were sent to a makeshift prison and their father Leon was taken away. They then heard that Warsaw was safe and entered, but anti-Semitism was spreading. Their apartment building had been confiscated and the Frozman family had nowhere to go.
The Warsaw Ghetto was initiated in the October of 1940, when placards were put up all over Warsaw telling people to get into the ghetto. Norman's family, coming from living in an apartment building, had to cram into a single room with two other families, and that's how they lived. Both Norman and his mother had to work for food cards, and all day Irenia had to hide behind a false wall. One day, Mordecai Nilowicz, a young teenager, decided that if all the people of the ghetto were going to die anyway, they wanted to go down with a weapon in their hands. Many people agreed and joined him. This resistance by the Jewish forces became known as the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising. Norman had wanted to join, but he was too young. It was for the better, because he would have died. When the ghetto was done with, Norman was transported to concentration camp Majdanek.
Majdanek's conditions were unbearable and became an experience some survivors won't forget. Sleeping there was difficult, thinking there was difficult, not to mention everything was difficult in short terms. After this, Norman was transported to the concentration camp Buchenwald, to be again transported to Schlieben to rebuild an ammunition factory the Nazis had bombed to create more work for the Jews. When the factory was rebuilt, Norman was transported to a death march, in which half of the laborers were sent to an alternate concentration camp, and the other half was forced to walk barefoot on a gravel road. But towards the end of this pain, in a schoolhouse, Norman was liberated by Russian officers.
Norman and his friends were overjoyed to finally be freed. From all of his experience with Germans, he knew how to speak German, and he had studied Russian in school, so he decided to serve as his interpreter for the Russian people. He was in a kibbutz for a short amount of time, and then he found his uncle was living in America. Of course, he decided to go there. After his boat ride there, he was amazed by how bright and amazing New York was, and for once, he was happy.
Was an area Norman wasn't used to. Cars zooming across the street and the sound of hundreds talking at a time. New York was the place to be. After arrival, Norman took the opportunity to visit his uncle and help run a candy store. Norman's father had managed to survive the conditions of the Soviet army and reunited with his father. Soon after this, at the Catskill Resort, Norman met his soon-to-be wife, Shelley. At the Catskill Resort, they had a constant love for each other, and soon enough married. When they married, Norman stopped working for his uncle at the candy store, and later they had 2 kids, Susanna and Helena.
Norman now enjoys his life with his 2 children, Susan and Helena, and his 2 grandkids. At age 84, Norman received an honorary high school diploma. He was unable to do this at the correct time since he happened to be in a concentration camp.
And I've just said that I remember still a song that I've learned from the Czech, and it goes as follows. Tu červenou sukenku najlepší ze všechna, dnes večer si ji obleknu, až přijdeš chlapě k nám. Get rid of a 4-letter word. That's the first thing. And that word is hate. Because this word of hate, the 4 letters, were the cause to every problem that the Second World War was about. Intolerance, bullyism, and this created a great catastrophe that many people lost their families, lost their lives. I don't know of any family, Jewish family, that was during the Holocaust, that they did not suffer any losses of families or friends, to say the least. Plus dignity, self-esteem, it was taken from us. And for what? What is the basic crime that we all committed? None. None. Whenever I go to a school, I love these kids. They are the protectors of my grandchildren. For the grace of God, I survived the hell on earth, and I owe it to the young people of today to more or less represent, if I may use that word, the ones whose voices have been silenced. And the reason being, so this tragedy does not repeat itself. History is capable of repetition. Let's prevent it. Thank you to all.
So I want to thank all of you for driving all the way here and spending the entire day with us. I know it's exhausting, and I really appreciate it, and I'm pretty sure that all of us appreciate them. So let's say thank you to all our survivors and our guests.